I
Yeah.
heard this really great analogy about knowing when to cut, and it was that Michelangelo, when he was carving David, apparently his process was to just chip away anything that wasn't David. And like obviously he was a genius,
Yeah.
a total master. But like that's exactly it. Like chipping away at anything that's not really true to the essence of your story.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And I think that's also where a pair of more objective eyes comes in, because I can generally see, in a more distilled way, what's the essence of this story? What is the author trying to
Hmm.
do? Without all of the authors like, but I love this character. I like that moment. Well, that happened in my real life, and there's all these
Right.
things, all this stuff that we bring into our stories that, you know, they aren't David, right? They're the
Hmm.
rest of the marble that needs to get chipped away.
Hmm. Hello, and welcome to So I Wrote a Book. Now what? Where writers chat about writing. Today's episode is just a little bit different. My guest today is Joanna Thurlow, and she is a developmental editor. So if you have ever wondered if you might need a developmental editor, this is the episode to listen to. She goes through her whole process and what a developmental edit entails. It's very informative. Let's get into it. Official. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you are a developmental editor.
I am.
That is amazing. What drew you to that?
I came to editing through beta reading, actually. So I write myself, and I have, writing groups and writing friends or whatever, and I've been doing some beta reading, and I really enjoyed it, and I really found it really fun and exciting and much easier than with my own work to like look at someone else's work and kind of see the which puzzle pieces were missing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had a chat with it about it with my friend Carolyn, who always gives me really great life advice. And it was at a moment when I was like in between careers. I had just sold my business. I kind of hadn't decided what my next step was. And I was telling her how much I really loved doing this beta reading. And she was like, "So why don't you do that?" So I was like, "Be a professional beta reader? Like, what does that look like?" So I did a little research, and I kind of found developmental editing, and it sounded exactly like what I wanted to do. So I went from there.
Nice. So how did you kind of work towards pursuing that goal of becoming a developmental editor?
Yeah, so that very day that I had that conversation with my friend, I actually signed up for a course through the Editorial Freelancers Association for editing romance. And it was like kind of a split second decision, but I was like, it was, relatively affordable. The timeline was right. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to dive in. And thinking, at the very least, it will at least help my own writing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I did it, and that was a pretty short course and fairly focused on just romance. And I was like, I really like this, but I want to dig in deeper. So then I looked into the development editing courses through the EFA, and yeah, signed up and did the first course for that. I did it over almost a year or so. It took a little while. I just took my time with it and really got into the material, and I really loved it.
What kind of coursework does that look like? Do you like practice things on like fake manuscripts, or is it like people volunteer for it? How does
Yeah,
that work?
so the instructor actually uses, she's a developmental editor herself, and so she actually uses, with permission, manuscripts from her prior clients.
Oh, cool.
So in the first course, we didn't do a full length manuscript because that's quite a big job, but it was like
Uh-huh.
40 or 50 pages. And we would kind of do like snippets at a time looking for particular things like, this chunk of the manuscript, what's happening in terms of the plot beats or the character development or
Uh-huh.
whatever. So it was pretty neat that way.
Yeah, that's very cool. When would you say, so if I was looking for a developmental editor, and full disclosure, Joe has done a developmental edit for me. That's how I know she does this. But like when an author is searching for that, when do they know that that's something that they might need?
That's a really good question, and I think it's an important one as well, because I don't think as soon as you have a finished draft that that's the time. I think you need to have beta readers. You need to go through several rounds of revision on your own. You need to trim your word count as much as possible because you pay per word, basically with
Hmm.
most developmental editors. Um, and if you find yourself, and not everybody needs one, right? But if you find yourself, you have your manuscript, you've been working on it for a while, and you're like, it just needs something, or you keep getting the same feedback either from your beta readers or maybe from literary agents. Um, maybe it's the pacing or maybe it's the character development or whatever, and you just kind of don't know how to do it yourself. Just to have that kind of professionally trained set of eyes on it, I think can be really helpful. So
Hmm.
it's not a first draft thing, it's a further down the line thing. And to be clear, with a developmental edit, I don't generally fix grammar or punctuation. I mean, I do because I'm annoying like that, but it's not actually within the scope
I did not
of,
find it annoying.
well, thank you. I can't help myself. It's not actually within the scope of a development editor. So I just want to clear that up because I feel like when most people hear the word editor, they think, oh, somebody's going to fix my grammar.
Right.
And that's not exactly what I do. I take more of a big picture, like kind of the 30,000 foot view, and see what the manuscript needs in terms of bigger picture issues. Yeah. So I think, yeah, once you're at a point with your manuscript where you're like, it's not quite reaching its fullest potential, um, that's the time. That's the time to look up
And
an editor.
what is your feedback style? So let's say, purely an example, nobody would ever do this. I sent to you a contemporary romance, and at the end of the manuscript, she does not end up with who has been the main other person in the novel, the one you thought was maybe the love interest. What would
Mhm.
your style of feedback be for that person? Like, how
I
do
mean,
you tell them they don't have a romance?
right. Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, I think, as a developmental editor, my job is to help the writer say what they want to say, to help them accomplish what they set out to accomplish. So if this
Hmm.
person is really dead set on being a romance author, then I think that's a really important feedback to give. Just say, this could be a wonderful book, it could have all the elements are there, but if it doesn't have that happily ever after, then it's just not a romance, right?
Hmm.
If that wasn't an important thing to the author, if they didn't really care about being a romance author and this was the story, and they really wanted it to be that way, then fine. But just to give them that heads up that if they're querying it or pitching it, understand where it fits within the genre, which is it doesn't fit within the romance genre.
Yeah.
Mm.
um, so what are the steps involved? So if someone hires you for a developmental edit and they submit their manuscript, kind of like what should they expect?
Yeah, so I like to have a little discovery call. You and I didn't do this because we came to it through different circumstances, but I like to get on the phone and just get a feel for one another to give them confidence that I'm like a trustworthy person, maybe know what I'm talking about. And also just to make sure it's a good fit.
Hmm.
Because there are stories that aren't for me, and it's nothing, doesn't mean that those stories are bad or not good or wrong or anything, but there are just some things that like I want to be excited to work on your project, right?
Yeah,
And I am
totally.
most of the
Yeah.
time. Like it's very rare, I think, that I would ever turn something down, but I do have some boundaries around that. And so, a quick discovery call, kind of 15-30 minutes. And then you'd send your full manuscript and we'd agree on a date and a turnaround time. So for like an average length manuscript, it takes me like 2 to 3 weeks. And when I say average length, I mean like 80-90,000 words.
Hmm.
um, we'd agree on the start date and the end date, and on the end date, or maybe before, depends on how fast I go with that, I would send a full edit letter. So you've received one, it's long, it's detailed, they're normally around like at least 10 pages long, single spaced. It's like a lot of feedback.
Uh-huh.
Very detailed, followed by a phone call. So once the authors had a moment to like read the feedback, digest it, understand, what's sitting with them, what they want to work on, maybe things they don't understand, things they want to brainstorm about. Then once they're there, then we have a follow-up call. And that call can be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, 2 hours. I like to give time for that, as much time as
Hmm.
the author needs. Yeah.
That's very nice. One thing I did find really helpful about your edit letter is that it had suggestions for places to start.
Yeah.
Um, because and I've read this manuscript that you worked on. I've read it 10 billion times. So, and
Hmm.
I've changed a lot over the course of me writing it. So I was like, I feedback, fine, bring it. 20 pages. I can absorb it. But when I got to it and it was like 10 pages, I was like, oh, that is a lot to absorb. I don't know where to
It
start. So
is.
having those like good places to start was so helpful because I was like, yeah, that is a good place to start. I'll start there.
Good.
And then
Good. I'm
from there,
glad
it
to
was
hear
easy to
it.
kind of like work through it like a puzzle. But I did find that so helpful.
I'm glad. Yeah. My instructor for the course says that the way that she explains it, like she was the one who encouraged us to do this. And she said the way she explains it to her clients is that, like, when her kids were young, she would say to them, clean up your room. And it would just kind of never get done or clean up your toys. But if she said, start with the dinosaurs, put them away, and then do the trucks, then that was a much easier, like, kind of way for them to understand, like, how to start this process. And
Totally.
I mean, I think that it applies too. And what's really interesting is it's almost always character and pacing is the one that
Yeah.
comes up really, really
Yeah.
often. Yeah.
That's such a nice metaphor too, and I'm gonna take it with me when I work on edits in the future, is just to start with your dinosaurs and then do your
Yeah.
trucks.
And
Because
then
it
do your
also kind
trucks.
of makes it feel less daunting, you know?
Mm,
Because sometimes when you see the whole scope of your work, which is basically what you're helping people do, is see the whole thing at once, it's
yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to take it all in.
It is, yeah. And it's again a lot of very detailed feedback and a lot of, you know, sometimes like kind of smaller, not nitpicky things. I don't ever want to feel people to feel like I'm nitpicking, but I also don't want to leave any stone unturned. Like if somebody's
Mm-hmm.
hiring me, I want to say everything that I have to say,
Mm-hmm.
but not everything that I have to say is as important as one another. There are some things that need, more attention or are less subjective. Because I mean, also the other thing with a developmental edit or with any kind of edit, really, I mean, not so much like a copy edit, there are rules there, but with a developmental edit, it's like it's truly like these are just my feelings and my opinions. And yes, it's educated, but it's like I'm just a girl at the end of the day, right?
Right.
So I mean, yeah, but then there are some things that do come in as kind of more important, less subjective.
Yeah. How do you convey that in giving your information?
I think it kind of comes up because it's things that I keep coming back to. So often in an edit letter, I'll say, there's this, there's X, and then there's Y, but if you work on X, Y will solve itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Mm-hmm.
it makes itself obvious, which are the
Mm.
things that are like, these are the really important things that you have to look at. And then once you hit those things, most other things, well, not always, but sometimes will fall into place.
Yeah, totally. When you work on a manuscript, what is your process for doing it? Because it's also a lot. I've done quite a lot of beta reading. I feel like if you're a writer and you're not doing a ton of beta reading, you're doing something wrong.
Mm,
Because you need to kind of pay that back because you need beta readers yourself, right?
absolutely.
And also I like to read what everybody's doing, but I find myself when I read it, um, like it's a lot to take in and it kind of changes over the scope of the manuscripts where sometimes my comments at the beginning aren't as relevant
Yeah.
as they were. So how do you kind of navigate that while working on a manuscript?
Yeah, so I do normally two reads of the manuscript. So the first one that I do is very, very detailed, really focusing every line. I put notes in the margins. I use the track changes, and I'll often write like in caps so that I see it. Like make sure this doesn't change or whatever, so that when I go back and reread it again, the second read is kind of much quicker, just to make sure I didn't really miss anything, and also to find those moments where I made a comment on something and then it changed later. And,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I don't always get every single one. Sometimes I'll talk to an author and they'll be like, I think, 50 pages later, I did do that. I'm like, yes, you did. But I try my best.
It's still
Yeah.
good to know though, especially like if it's a comment like that and they did take care of it 50 pages later. Like if the reader is wanting to know 50 pages prior, that's a
Yeah,
good like flag. That's a good thing
totally.
to know.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good, like, it's almost gives you the confidence to be like, okay, I did do it. Maybe you need to move it up a little bit, or
Mhm.
because I really do like, I mean, some editors don't do notes on their first read through. They just read like a reader. But for me, I really want that momentary reaction, exactly what
Mhm.
comes to my mind because yeah, I don't want to have to not that I don't want to have to overthink it. I don't want to overthink it. I mean, I am reading like a reader in that sense, right?
Mhm.
Because as you're
Mhm.
reading, you're asking yourself questions, you're having these reactions. So those are my in the moment reactions. And,
Mhm.
sometimes I'm wrong about it or whatever, but I think it's still valid to have it on the page.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Do you feel like learning all of this developmental editing has made an impact on your own writing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do things in my writing. Like the other day I was writing, I'm working on a second draft at this point, and I was writing this character and I was like, who is this person? She never appears again in the book, and yet I've given her a name, I've given her a physical description. They have this like whole scene together, and then she disappears and is never mentioned again. And while that character is great, like didn't want to let her go, I had to do the old, kill your darlings
Uh,
and let her go
yeah.
because that's feedback that I often give is, this character's great. What what purpose do they serve to the story?
Hmm.
So it makes me aware of my own not shortcomings but things to work on. What's
Totally.
really interesting though is like it's in the moment. I find it so hard to edit my own work, like I can't be subjective about it.
Hmm.
um so yeah, I think it helps in the writing but not necessarily in the editing.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Um, I one of yours, I also do the same thing, and I do it a lot. I cut characters all the time because I just everybody has a backstory in my
Yep.
head,
Yep.
and if I thought of it, it's important, but
Hmm.
it's not.
Yeah.
So I cut like a character that a beta reader a long time ago did tell me like, what is the purpose of this character, even though I love him. I was like, because I love him.
Yeah. Was it
That's the
Frank?
purpose. But yeah, it was Frank.
Yeah. R.I.P. Frank.
R.I.P. Frank. He'll show up in another
You
story. He's
will.
shown up in two now, so
Well, he needs
I'm
his
sure
own
he'll make
arc,
another
maybe.
appearance.
Yeah.
But then I was working on a different manuscript. I'm going through and editing it today, and I just cut another lady that I was like, I'm just calling them all Frank now, if it's like
Yeah.
a superfluous. But I had your like notes in my head and my beta reader in my head. And I was like, what's Frank doing?
Frank's fighting his way in, but yeah.
Doesn't need
Yeah,
to be
sometimes
there.
we gotta get rid of Frank, I guess.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
hard. It's also a tricky thing too because you want to balance the showing versus telling, right?
Hmm.
And it feels more showing if you give the character a name and you give them all of this richness. Um, but a lot of times, if it's not necessary to the story, then it's just kind of subtracting. How
Hmm.
do you balance that kind of showing versus telling in your feedback?
Um, it's always a tricky one, because it's not something that I don't like, it's not something you can study. I find a lot of elements of writing, you can study it and say, okay, look out for this. But showing versus telling, I find, is much more abstract. I think it's like it's almost just an instinctual thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
If it just feels like, okay, you're telling me this, but I'm not, if I don't feel like I'm connecting to that information. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you need to tell. You can't show every single thing. Your book would be a million pages long, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes when it feels either important to the story or unimportant to the story. It's one or the other. If I'm being told it, either I want to connect with it, I need it more, I need more of a connection to it, or it's just, why are you telling me this? It doesn't feel important. Get rid of it altogether. I
Yeah.
heard this really great analogy about this, not necessarily showing and telling, but like knowing when to cut. And it was that Michelangelo, when he was carving David, apparently his process was to just chip away anything that wasn't David. And like obviously he was a genius,
Yeah.
a total master. But like that's exactly it. Like chipping away at anything that's not really true to the essence of your story.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And I think that's also where a pair of more objective eyes comes in, because I can generally see, from in a more distilled way, what's the essence of this story? What is the author trying
Mm-hmm.
to do, without all of the authors like, but I love this character. I like that moment. Well, that happened in my real life, and there's all these
Right.
things, all this stuff that we bring into our stories that, you know, they aren't David, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the marble that needs to get chipped away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that metaphor did really help me lose Frank.
Yeah.
I was like,
Sorry.
not David. That's okay.
Yeah.
Clearly, I'm still in. Um, so what kind of things do you look for in your developmental edit? If someone submits their manuscript to you, what are you looking at for the big picture?
Um, things, there's a kind of a lot of things that I usually identify. It depends on the manuscript, of course, but there's almost always, stuff having to do with character, their arc, their development, their misbelief or their wound. What are their motivations? And making sure that that all fits and flows really well together.
Hmm.
Obviously, the plot. Are they hitting kind of the right beats at the right time? I'm not a real stickler for beats. There are some that I think are really important, particularly in romance, because romance readers have very specific expectations.
Hmm.
But it still has to make sense. The progression of the story, the plot has to make sense, as well as structure. What's happening if there's a dual timeline or a dual POV? How are those two working together? Stakes is a big one. What are the
Hmm.
internal stakes? What are the external stakes? How do they come together? How do they motivate the character? How does the character's misbelief motivate the stakes? I mean, they're all kind of like intertwined.
Hmm.
Pacing is always really important. Tension, kind of almost one and the same. If the pacing is good, it generally means the tension is good.
Hmm.
The story world and the setting. And I do a bit of like kind of line level writing stuff. It's more like if somebody has a tendency to do things or to say things in a certain way versus like fixing your sentences. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
Plotting consistencies I'll look at. And then, sometimes there's just miscellaneous funny things that come up in a manuscript. Yeah, and then I'll do your, like we mentioned, your two things that, where to start, right? Your dinosaurs and your
Hmm.
sharks. So
Hmm.
that's, yeah, kind of how I approach it.
Very cool. One of the things that you kind of called out to me that now I think about a lot that I didn't really think about before was my characters usually ask a lot of questions, which makes
Mm,
sense because I ask a lot of questions in my head
hmm.
all the time, but not everybody thinks that way.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful and it's changed the way I write my interiority a lot.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, it's been very cool. And I've taken it with me to other manuscripts,
That
which is
is really good
also,
to hear.
I know, yay.
Thanks.
Yeah, now they just like question, 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 question when they spiral, which
Right.
all
Well,
of them
and
do
that's fair,
eventually.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, well, good. They should spiral at some point for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
everybody does.
Yep.
That's very cool. Are there any books that you have read that kind of inspired you on your writing journey?
Yeah. I mean, so many. I think what I'm working on right now, the book Bunny by Mona Awad, and
Mm,
also
mm-hmm,
Rouge by Mona Awad. She's been my girl lately. Um, I found I found her writing style, especially just so like free and um like untethered to expectations. And
mm-hmm.
same a little bit with Miranda July's All Fours, just in
Oh, I
terms of
haven't read
like,
that one yet.
oh, it's really good. I mean, it's very divisive. People love it or hate it. I personally loved it. And again, it kind of came to less the writing in that one, more the plot. I mean, it gets pretty, things get pretty weird. And I found it really inspiring though. Um, this idea of just putting yourself out there and being really free and open as a writer. That's what
Hmm.
I'm hoping to accomplish with this second manuscript. But yeah, we'll see.
What genre do you write when you write your own writing?
So I've written a romance. that I'm currently querying. And, querying is a whole thing, as we all
It's
know.
the worst.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it can like build you up and break you down so fast.
It really
Um,
can.
it really can. Uh, but, and I mean, I think reading and writing, or reading romance and editing romance, like that's really my sweet spot.
Hmm.
But writing this, what I'm working on now is almost more of a like psychological thriller.
Ooh.
I'm not as familiar with genre conventions for thrillers as I am for romance, so I'm not sure exactly like if it really fits into the genre perfectly.
Hmm.
Maybe a bit satirical. Yeah, I want to play like I feel like through writing. So I've actually written two romances now, but one was just like from my eyes only, like just to start the project and finish it. I haven't looked at it in years. It'd probably be really
Yeah.
funny to me now, actually. I should edit it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm removed enough from it that I might be able to. Um, yeah, but I think I figured out that maybe I don't want to be a romance writer. That said, I always have ideas for romances, so
Why have you
maybe
decided you don't want to be
I
one?
don't know. It's not that I don't want to I don't want to define myself as a romance writer, I guess is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying. It's like I would love to continue to write romances, but I also want to have the freedom to go and write other genres as well. And
Yeah.
so I don't know what that means for me, having writing as a career, if that's something I'd need to compromise on or whatever, but haven't had to worry about that yet. So that'd be a good problem to have.
Totally. I think it's more common now maybe than before to write in multiple genres.
Mm,
There's quite a few authors that do it, but I did recently, not recently, it's been a while now, but I went to a pitch event and it was through a writing group I was a part of through the Thriller 101 podcast. And so it was
mm,
a thriller pitch event specifically. Um, but my thriller was not ready to query. And so I was like, can I pitch a romance to the author,
right.
to the agents that are there that I have researched and know rep romance?
Hmm.
And David was like, yeah. I mean, why I don't see why not. So I
Yeah,
was like, okay. But I did get the question a lot, why aren't you pitching me a thriller? So, and I was like, well,
sure.
I write thrillers, but it's not ready. And they were like, well, what are you gonna do? Write
Mm,
both? Um, and they asked it generally curious, and it maybe wasn't negative, maybe wasn't positive, but it was definitely a question where I was like,
right.
I don't know.
Did you feel like they were kind of saying like pick a lane or
Nobody outright said that.
mm,
Um, One person said it would be harder. Like if you were
mhm.
gonna do both, it might be more challenging. But I feel
Yeah.
like you
I
have
mean,
to write what you're called to write.
I think so, right? I mean, I understand, publishing is a business. And for example, if you query a rom-com and get a two-book deal, they're probably going to want a rom-com for the second
Right.
one. And that like makes sense to me, right? But
Yeah.
if it's like, oh no, you have to have your whole career writing rom-coms, I feel like that would be very limiting, and
Hmm.
I think as a creative person, the last thing you want are limits.
Yeah, definitely. And look at Rachel Hawkins. She writes amazing thrillers and she also
Yeah.
writes cute magic based rom-coms under Erin Sterling and
Yeah.
all her books. So she's doing okay. Or
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So, have you ever had a developmental edit yourself on one of your manuscripts?
I have, yeah. It was a really interesting thing. So I started querying my romance last spring and I sent out like 35 queries or something and I got a pretty good request rate.
Hmm.
And I sent out I think five full manuscripts and still haven't got one back yet. But they all came back with kind of the same feedback.
Hmm.
And it's funny because it was something I already knew, but I didn't know that I knew. But
Yeah.
when I read it
Don't
the
you
first
hate
time,
that?
I hate it because I'm like, you hear it and you go, yeah, of course. Sometimes you get feedback and you're like, but
Yeah.
when you hear it and it lands just so immediately and you don't question it, like I think that's the stuff you really have to pay attention to. And so I kept getting this feedback repeatedly, and I was like, I get it. I agree with it, but I don't know how to fix it. And it wasn't something that my beta readers, who are all wonderful, but it wasn't really something that they had flagged either.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't really know how to go about it. And I was already doing the developmental editing course at that time. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it would be really interesting to go through this process from the other side so that like I can say when I'm editing somebody and when I'm working with them, like I can honestly say, I know how this is. I know what this
Uh-huh.
process feels like. I know what you're going through.
Totally.
Yeah, so I worked with an editor early in the new year and had a really positive experience. He was really great. Uh, and learned also like, and no shade to him, but just things that I would want to add to the offering,
Mm-hmm.
and how I wanted to do it my way. Uh, but yeah, and his feedback was really on point, and it was the same as I mean, I told him, I said, this is the feedback I've gotten from agents, and he was like, "Yep, I see that exactly. Here is what I suggest," because we know that agents
Right.
aren't, you know, going to sit down and they'll tell if you get feedback at all, they're not going to tell you how to fix it, right? So
Yeah.
having that perspective was so helpful. And then going through that with him too, I was like, okay, I don't want this to be just something I'm doing for my own writing. Because when I invested in the longer course, the bigger course, is like, okay, this is much more time, it's much more money. Um, and I don't even know if I want to do this, but I kind of justified it to myself as being, well, it'll help my own writing. So
Mm-hmm.
if that's all it comes to, then that's all it is. But I did the course, or I was working on the course, and I worked with him, and working with him really helped me solidify, like, oh no, I like this process. I want to do what he's doing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's very cool. Did you go back and fix the manuscript with his suggestions?
I did. Yep. I gave it a little while, which I think is important to kind of like let things kind of marinate for a little while. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I went back and I fixed it, not fixed it, I changed it.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I think languaging around that is important.
Yeah, that's
Um,
so true.
Yeah, but I made the changes that he suggested, not all of them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing, like as an editor, I don't expect an author to take every single one of my suggestions at all. And I didn't take every single one of his, but the ones that
Mm-hmm.
seemed the most pertinent, I did.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard part is though, is that, kind of the way that freelance editing at least is set up is that you give the feedback and then you kind of send the author on their way. And I mean, I welcome follow-ups. Like if you had a question or, you wanted to go over something with me, I'd be happy to do it. But also it is, how we make our living. So you can't invest
Mm-hmm.
hours and hours and hours doing follow-ups. Um, so yeah, so you get the feedback, you make the changes, and then I'm like, did I do it? You know, is this good now?
Yeah.
So that is the tricky part.
Yeah.
Uh,
Did
and
you
I
send
feel
it to
better
beta
about it.
readers?
One, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, because yeah, I limited it to just one because I was just like, they've read this so many times now. I'm not actually sure how
Yeah,
objective people can really be when they've
totally.
known like two or three different iterations of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I've kind of gotten it like, I don't know if you've gotten like this with any of your manuscripts, but I'm at a point now where it's like, I feel like this is the amount of work that, not that I'm willing to put in on it, but at this stage, like I don't
Mm-hmm.
mind if that's not the one that makes me into a published author. I'll
Mm-hmm.
keep trying, but if I move on and, keep writing and it's the second or third or fourth or whatever, then
Yeah.
I'm open
I've
to that.
definitely put some to bed.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not even that more work I feel like would be a waste. I feel like I got um one in particular to a place where I really like the book and I don't want to change it.
Yeah. I'm
And
I'm
so
there.
if it's
Yeah.
not for everybody, it's not for everybody.
Yeah. That's
It's
it.
what it is.
Yep. And I can really say like I feel proud of the book and the story as it is. And if it ever hits a bookstore shelf, great. If it doesn't, then I'm also okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay, yeah, okay to move on. It's taken a lot to get to this point, right? Um, but yeah, I'd be thrilled if it did.
Sometimes,
But
sometimes I'm a little jealous though, because some people are so like attached to that one book, that one manuscript. And I
Hmm.
feel like I definitely like love a lot of my books. I mean, I love all of the books that I've written, but I definitely see that some are better than others. Some
Totally, yeah.
some nobody ever will read ever. Um, but I get tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't know if it's a lack of passion for me in the story or if it's a lack of passion in the querying process in
Yeah.
general. I'm not sure.
I think, I mean, it could be either, I guess, but I think for me, it's like this feeling of, yeah, it just kind of wears you down and it wears, for me at least, it kind of wears down my confidence around the story. Because I think,
Mm-hmm,
like, if this many, and it hasn't been that many people, it's 60 something people now,
mm-hmm.
um, have either, read the query, heard the pitch, read the full, and they're not on board, then, maybe that's feedback for me that this isn't the one.
Right.
I'm not going to give up yet because I know that's a relatively low number.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm going to keep trying, but yeah, I'm like, just like, I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's like, am I like telling myself this to make myself feel better, or is this truly how I feel? Like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
can't unpack that in my own brain, but
totally.
I'll put on the brave face and be very cool about it on a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually will end up giving myself like number goals
Hmm.
um like for querying specifically because it is so tiring. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to keep putting yourself out there.
Yep, it really is. And I mean, it's also just really time consuming. Like Query Tracker has made some really nice changes now with the autofill stuff, but you still have to
Beware of the autofill though, because it'll
yeah,
autofill whatever the requirements of the last one you did was, right? So if the last
right.
one required the first 5 pages, then you only have 5 pages in that bottom section. So if the
Yeah.
next one is the first 3 chapters, you only submitted 5 pages.
Yeah. No, so
And
you're right. Like
I
there's the
do it
autofill,
every
but you
time
still
where I'm
have to
like, what, how
work.
much do they want? How much do they
I
want?
know. And I'm always so nervous. I'm like, did I write the right agent's name? Like that is a
Right.
nightmare for me.
Totally.
Yeah, I think they've made some good changes, but there's still more I feel like if you could just have your whole career package and just click the agent's name. And so Career Tracker, if you're listening, um,
Hmm.
be like, click the agent's name. The agent has submitted what they want. And then the software just immediately puts, here's the synopsis, here's the one-line pitch, here's
Hmm.
the query, here's however many pages they want. That's my wish for Query Tracker because it's so time consuming,
It
right? Like to
is.
send 10 queries, you're looking at a couple of hours of work. And
Yeah.
between your own writing and then your job and your kids and everything else, like that
Hmm.
time is actually, it's hard to squeeze in there. So
It definitely is. Do
yeah,
you ever work on query packages with your clients? Or is
I
that something
haven't
you
yet.
might offer?
Yeah, I mean, I might in the future if I felt more kind of confident about that, but
Hmm.
it's not something I would consider myself an expert in at this point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that anybody is.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done gotten a few query package critiques and they've been helpful. Um, yeah, they've been helpful.
Yeah. The best query feedback I received was from a Smooch Pit author, and
Oh yeah.
she had requested my full, and I was not selected as her Smooch Pit mentee, but because she had selected my full, she said, "You can like send me your query package whenever you're ready, and I'll help you with it." And her like my query letter, I sent it. I was feeling really good about it. It came back. It was all red. There was
Oh
like
gosh.
2 words in it that were not had something
Yeah.
on it, but it was so helpful. And it was
Hmm.
after that, it was clean. There was not a word that was misused or like superfluous at all.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's the level of detail you want in a query edit, I think. Because
Right.
yeah, every word's got to do the work.
Right. Because it's such a short amount of time. It's such a different beast altogether.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned, and if you don't want to answer this, that's totally cool, but you mentioned there were some things that you don't want to work on. Do you want
Yeah.
to mention at all what they are, just so people don't try to send them
Sure.
to you?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, yeah, I mean, in terms of genre or subgenre, I mean, so I'm focusing on romance.
Hmm.
Pretty much any subgenre. I don't read romantasy, so
Hmm.
I don't feel confident in like being able to deliver really good feedback on that because I'm
Hmm.
not super familiar with, fantasy genre conventions and world building and stuff like that. Um, Also anything on page like any violence against women or children, sexual assault on the page. If those things kind of inform the characters, if their experiences in the past or whatever, then that's fine. But I really want to read about it. So
Hmm.
just things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative. Is there anything
Thank
else that
you.
you would like to share?
Well, I do have a little offer for your listeners. If
Yay!
yay, if they're looking for a developmental edit, I would love to give them a 20% discount. So that would just mean reaching out to me either through my website, which is www.joannathurlow.com.
And I'll
My
link it.
name. Thank you. Or you
Hmm.
can email me at joe.thurlow.writes@gmail.com. Just mention that you listened to this interview, and we'll get you set up with your edit, and I'll give you a 20% discount.
That's so great. Yay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's amazing. It's so good. I made my changes, and like you said, like you make your changes and then you're like, did I do
Did I
it?
do
So it's with
it?
some beta readers right now, and they're gonna let me
Good.
know if I did
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And let me know if you did it too.
I will. I'm going to.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved both. I mean, I've read both of your manuscripts now and I really enjoyed them both. So,
Yay. Thank
yeah.
you. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Joe is a really insightful editor. And I just wanted to show you, if you're on YouTube, if you can see that this is printed. It's beautiful. It's my developmental edit letter from her. I really loved working with her. I got a lot out of my developmental edit, not only improving the manuscript I sent her and was working on, but also I've taken it with me into this next manuscript I'm working on. If you are on the fence or thinking maybe you might want to work with a developmental editor, I can't recommend Joe enough. Right now, she is offering 20% off for listeners of this show. So just email her and mention that you watched her on this show and you'll get a discount. So, yeah. If you enjoyed listening to this show or other shows, please consider rating or reviewing or liking or commenting or wherever you listen, whatever way you can engage with us. It really helps other listeners find us. This is the last episode in season 1. Woo woo! Um, I'll be back in just a couple weeks with season 2. If you've ever thought that you might want to share your writing journey, you can find a link in my bio on Instagram on how to do that. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.